Each episode of the Lion Goat podcast is completely improvised. Expect comedy. Do not expect consistency or sense to be made. This is random nonsense for your amusement. I am Podbot. Today's episode, Mesmerizing Journey, is our masterful storyteller plunges into the heart of a mythical river, where secret adventures are waiting to surface. As he navigates the twists and turns, prepare to be enchanted by an array of amazing creatures and natural landscapes that will leave you spellbound. Warning: if you want to experience this podcast as intended, listen while wearing stereo headphones.
Welcome to your next experience of the great beyond.
Deep in the jungle of the Australian outback, our intrepid traveler finds himself paddling down the magnificent Sycamore Creek. On dark green waters, dappled with the leaves of the freshly blossomed trees in this late spring summer wilderness. You can hear the water rustling in the background as he paddles Ellie the trusty yellow black-trimmed kayak down the Sycamore Creek. The wind blows a nice, pleasant breeze, chilling his body as his taut muscles ripple in the gleaming sunlight. Each paddle takes him farther into the dark wilderness, farther away from civilization, farther away from man and all the protections that man might bring. You can hear the trill of the cicadas. You can see the beautiful colors of the flying dragonflies as they gently descend upon the bow of his trusty kayak, resting on the body of his oar, reminding him that there are great adventures ahead and magnificent creatures that a man might not be able to pretend to explain or predict. A beautiful yellow finch flies across the creek ahead of him, flickering its wings, its dark black trim making the fire of its magnificent yellow feathers bloom. A great blue heron flies above him, letting out its mysterious crabby croak to warn all of its friends that there's an interloper in their midst. Its giant wings, spanning a mighty 6 feet, make a flap and a rustling sound. The reflection dances off of the water's surface, hinting at the waves of heat that rise above. White, pink, purple, yellow, and blue wildflowers dance along the banks of the creek on either side. Giant vines cling their way up the massive tree trunks, some choking the life out of the trees, some living in a pleasant symbiotic relationship. Duckweed and other brook grasses grow in the silt of the muddy waters, giving the giant fish places to hide and feed. Black swallow-tailed butterflies fly from stem to stem, branch to branch of the blossoming flowers and trees. Gnarled roots rise above the waterline, showing the weathered age, illustrating that all that lives in this great jungle estuary is wrinkled by time's savage rage. Another pleasant breeze blows across his body, calming him, reducing the amount of fear buffeting his bravery, pushing him forward, paddle stroke after paddle stroke. What will he discover on this trek? Will it be a giant snake, another water turtle, a red-eared slider, a stink pot? No one can tell. His mind drifts back over the relationships that he's had through his lifetime as he sees a giant rockfish gently fluttering its way through the waves beneath his bow. He crosses over the branches, the water-logged trunks of dead trees that lie just beneath the surface, waiting to grab hold of his boat, wrench him into a sudden capsize. You must be careful, dear listeners, for these are dangerous waters filled with crocodiles and alligators. Water snakes, with a single bite, steal the life of a man. No matter how brave he might feel, no matter how many adventures he's been on in the past, no matter how much his brain might tell him that there are adventures awaiting in the future. On this day, our hero realizes that he's reached the ripe old age of 48. Much longer than he ever thought his adventures would take him on this planet. And oh, the scrapes that he's gone through along the way. Near-death experiences, bar fights, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, great trail adventures on many of the world's longest trails, hikes over both cliff and waterfall, boat adventures on some of the world's most ferocious water bodies, through white water, raging, rampaging rivers. In the distance he can hear the low, lonely, sad song of a dove. He must complete his adventure before the afternoon, when the great winds of the Hurricane Barry, which has just recently landed to the southwest, will reach his location and decimate his camp with hard beating rains that may last for days, and gusts that threaten to rip the fabric of his canvas shelter forever away out of his possession. The current begins to rise as he draws closer to the mouth of the creek, to the spring that brings forth life to this area. The trees grow thicker. The cliffs on either side of the banks rise high, 80, 90, 100, 110 feet above the boat, 30, 40, 50 meters. On the rocks you can see the petroglyphs of the ancient civilizations that lived in this area thousands of years ago. Their legacies remain to be untold, except in the artwork they've left, leaving the minds of modern man only to question what these ancient relics might have meant. Whether they're comic books of the day or the great literary novels of a once prehistoric civilization that had no greater ways to communicate their sentiments. We may never know. Great buzzards fly above, circling over his kayak, waiting for the inevitable moment that might give them the sweet opportunity they've been waiting for. He scans the high cliffs for a chance to get a glimpse at a temperamental waterfall, a symbol of beauty in this vibrant ecology. He's been to this place before. He knows there's one somewhere around. He can't quite remember which of these gnarled trees, which of these intrepid trunks, which of these snags might mark the location. Upon his last arrival, it was just a distant pitter-patter in the depths of the dark greenery, unable to be seen because of the deep foliage. It's uncertain if he'll be able to see it today. A distant bush plane flies over, echoing its engines roar into the atmosphere. Call of predatory birds screeching out their warnings grows louder as he approaches the cove. A great massive tree trunk has fallen across the creek, blocking his way to the waterfall. He sits amongst the duckweed, the muddy banks of a narrow channel, amongst the seed pods and nuts of great trees that loom above him on either side. Normally, this part of the river is full of great currents, might wisp him away. But today it appears that the current is light, and he will be able to forge farther, perhaps farther down the river than he has ever before. The river is swollen from the recent rains in anticipation of the great rains to come, great flooding that may decimate these lands around this local vicinity, stealing the livelihoods of all of the locals. Quiet. Looks aboard him. The great heron has found a resting place on the trunk of a tree. He must head forward silently to prevent the great heron from seeing him and flying off. This is a rare opportunity. The great bird takes flight. Seeing him come forward over the back of its shoulder, doesn't hesitate to leap, let forth its great croak.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors. Just imagine, this could be your advertisement. Please reach us at LionGoatPodcast@gmail.com to provide sponsorship. And now, back to the show.
Birdsong becomes quiet and peaceful. But this was the great fishing grounds of the herons. This part of the stream, swollen. The water moves slowly. The current is almost naught but a ripple. Ripples of water, tiny explosions. Waves that radiate in greater and greater circles mark the places where the fish rise to ingest all the many bugs that flitter, try to find a way to make their lives in this harsh ecological system. Each of their lives spent in a matter of days, weeks, which seem like they last as long as the long 48 years that our intrepid traveler has survived. Nearly half a century. Beautiful shelf fungus grows along the great trunks that extend out of the water. The current begins to increase as he leaves this peaceful landscape and heads back into the dark forest. The sky above ripples with light whisper clouds across an azurean, cerulean background. The sun, hot and mighty in the middle of the season, rips through the clouds, leaving great rays of wonder that leave a man trying to explain what great power must have created this landscape. A mighty beast of a trout swims under the bow, seeking solace, its body thick, rippling with great swimming muscles, at least 17 centimeters in diameter. He's reached a hydrological station. Great generators under the water, emanating the siren call of civilization, demonstrating that no matter how far our adventurer attempts to get, the environment has always seen the touch of man before in this country. He reaches a part of the river that's rarely passed under the bow of his kayak, distracts him from his narrator's shore. Great banks covered with green, thick moss, cratered by erosion, and great holes where snakes and other potentially harmful beasts lie. He must venture around a sharp S-curve in the creek. The water levels low. He faces unknown navigational markers. Current grows great. He must increase his speed to make it past this low part of the river. Will he have the power, ladies and gentlemen? His old jabs down deep into the rocky bottom. He uses all of his strength to try to attempt to make it through this area in a desperate attempt to prevent his equipment from becoming waterlogged. He must be careful. A great snag, a giant tree trunk, crosses the creek in front of him. He must paddle hard to make it underneath its snares. He's reached the end of his path. The creek is too shallow to proceed farther. He decides that he'll have to come back to this creek another day. He's not well armed to face what unknown dangers may lie ahead. The time is short for this adventure. He sees the red stalks, the dangerous poisonous plants, gentle vines from which the rain must drip into the water after the storm. The high rise of the mud on the banks of the rocky cliffs, suggesting that the waterline can go to much higher places. Times of the flash floods that will inevitably come to this area later today. He's grateful that he's been to this place at this time of relative calm, able to witness the beauty of the area rather than all of its potential dangers. Heading downriver again, the breeze blows in his face as he approaches the generators. He must perfectly thread the needle of the concrete embankments that allow the water to cascade over the turbines, which provide energy to the closest municipal location. Perfectly, he uses his deft skill his years of wisdom with a paddle, perfectly placed J-stroke to whisper through unscathed. He reflects upon the beautiful reflection, all the hues of the light yellow greens, the white undersides of the upturned leaves in anticipation, the deep hunter green from the distant trees, noticing all the weathered flat rocks rippling beneath the surface. He must dodge another branch. This place of current. Places the river is only 4 to 5 centimeters deep, in other places as much as 3 to 4 meters. He takes a different course back, a much shallower part of the river. He may have to get out here, folks. He may not be able to thread it. The bottom only a couple inches below his boat. Now he's set himself up. He might have to go back. He finds himself moored. Shallow, rocky bottoms. His life threatened by the great current of the area. Using his mighty muscles, he lifts his boat underneath him, shifts his body around so that he can spin, back paddling, backwards through the current, around the snags, twisting his boat on a dime, applauding the trusty Ellie as he must ply great force to overcome the currents and make it around the snags to get back to the deeper part of the waters. That's the way it goes, folks. Sometime when you're on exploratory path, you find a nice new way to see the world around you. Sometimes you have to backpedal, whichever the case might be. But life is about spice, the new experiences. An explorer on every journey must remember to try a slightly different path each time so that he can ensure that every adventure gives him that sense of glory, that sense of pride. It can only come from overcoming a new challenge. Beautiful blossoms of the great mimosa trees on either side of the bank, with their dripping prehistoric flower shapes. Their ancient dangling seed pods remind of a time when great dinosaurs, great lizards, used to walk this terrain. Time before great glaciers had dug the channels of this river were a common occurrence, a common sight. Predatory birds loom in the distance as he reapproaches the area of the waterfall, notifying their kin that an even greater predator is present. He sees a giant river trout. It skitters, cascading a giant plume of muddy bottom in its wake, a dust screen hiding its escape from all of its ferocious underwater predators. The dust cloud is ineffectual against this predator. From his higher vantage above the water, he can see through the great plume, see the rippling dorsal fin. Quizzically, the wind begins to rise. Now that he's going back upstream, downstream, he can see the great clouds of the distant storm rising, plotting out the beautiful blue of the sky with their ominous castles, turning the nimbus clouds into great supercumulonimbus clouds, cascading their atmospheric imminence to all watchers from the surface of this mighty planet, reminding the egotistical creatures something with a much greater power exists. More cranes and herons fly across the river in the far distance, revealing the beauty and the grace of these great creatures, the extreme power that it takes to lift their giant bodies off of the banks, trunks of the river's victims. The biggest fish he's seen yet, nearly a meter long, dares to come close enough to the surface and then disappears into the dark, green depths of the water beneath. showing blue scales, great white lines, deep spots. The wind dies low as he reaches a wide part of the river. Very little current. Sound of the great masses of cicadas begin to rise, giving an eerie sense to the atmosphere. Only the highest boughs of the trees move in a breeze unfelt at the water's surface. Great hanging vines drip like ancient stalactites off of the trunks on either bank. Though they're seasonal, they tell a story of great longevity, of a never-ending cycle that repeats year to year. Extensive growth from the tiniest seeds, growing remarkable lengths in extremely short time. He begins to paddle faster as the eeriness of this place casts a dark feeling across his heart. Something in the air here that he doesn't like, a mysterious feeling. Giant wolf spider lies upon the trunk of the nearest fallen sycamore. Its legs span larger than a man's hand, perches awaiting its next prey. Desperate to reach the next shade spot, he continues to paddle. The day grows later. The mosquitoes begin to drift on the breeze, trying to find an uncovered patch of skin so that they may take their vampiric feed, spread their disastrous disease. Never ceases to amaze. Such a tiny creature could be the greatest threat to mankind in an entire ecosystem. The breeze begins to rise again. Gratitude blows across his heart, for it's that breeze that will keep these tiny, desperate demons from destroying any chance of joy. He realizes that it's time for a snack. He must add more fuel to the fires burning in the engine of his body. Desperate for calories, he takes his trail treat from his deep pockets. Careful not to get the disgusting sulfurous mud from his recent required escarpment. He crunches into the sweet, honey-soaked granola, an instant boon to his spirit, like the burst of a sudden lightning strike. The dopamine neurotransmitters erupt through his brain.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors. Just imagine this could be your advertisement. Please reach us at LionGoatPodcast@gmail.com to provide sponsorship. And now, back to the show.
Within an instant, he knows that he'll be able to complete the final leg of his journey, make it back to his vehicle before he falls victim to the great goddess of weather, the evil whims of Mother Nature. He sees upon the rise an encampment, a dangerous sight. The stone fire ring of some unknown tribe, be they enemy or friend, he knows not. For he can see that they've cultivated the field behind him with some unknown form of agriculture. A good spot they've picked, nestled in the roots of a great sycamore tree, a hunting perch that they've built as a lookout tower. Luckily, the tower is unmanned, and he's able to creep through with barely a sound. The whisper of the wake of carefully placed oars. His keen muscles able to skillfully maneuver the oar without touching the sides of the boat, without notifying anyone sleeping nearby of his presence. Great canes of bamboo and black willow line the banks of this area of the creek, creating walls of such great density that no traveler, even one with the keenest eyes like our intrepid adventurer, could see through, as if they've been placed there on purpose. He comes across a great school of river trout. They flourish and swarm around the boat, below him, in great arcing circles, in front, behind, underneath, around, leaving a wake of oozing algae, dank river mud, and a seemingly maleficent tale of their lost companions who weren't so lucky in past interactions with greater predators, their brethren who've fallen victim to a fish of a more devilish mindset. The white reflection of the clouds on the gentle ripples of the river ahead create a momentum and static. The ripples look like an ancient form of TV screen, telling a much wiser tale, a more ancient form of communication of waves. Not a story of an electrostatic pulse, but a story of great fluid dynamics. A story as old as time itself. A story of the great curvature, momentum, current of interactions. Great buzzards sit upon the jagged stalks of ancient, destroyed trees. In anxious anticipation, they wait for their next victim, the next opportunity for them to serve their dastardly detrifor role, a dangerous demonstration of power in their mighty talons. They show the other side of the coin from the great docile herons, scavengers, spending their lives in waiting, opportunists, bottom feeders. A timid water turtle peeks its head up above the surface and then skittishly dives into the deep green. Immediately upon seeing the great craft in its wake. What mysteries these peculiar creatures must hold in their extremely long lifespans. They may bridge the life of more than 2 men, yet they seem to have very solitary lives. Perhaps it's our misinterpretation. What communication methods do they have? Are they able to experience a breath of emotions like love, kinship, or is their life one fleeting moment of terrifying survival to the next? We may never know. Branches extend their arms from below the surface, reaching, testing a man's merit, testing a man's concentration. Takes a gulp of his trusty canteen, knowing that he has less than a half a liter left. He must conserve his water, for it is the only thing between a man and the call of death in these extreme environments. He approaches the great beaver dam that's built across the river in front of him. Perhaps it's the greatest creation of these mammalian architects, like the toils of Sisyphus, to rise and fall with the seasons. These these relatively small creatures. A great fly lands upon the bow of Ellie. It's an evil black creature with eyes twice as large as its abdomen. Stares at him, just waiting to bite his flesh. With great death speed, he swats it with his oar, gently so that it may live another day. One of the dragons of the river lands upon the ropes, a beautiful blue stripe down its dark carapace, demonstration that even in the most ugly of creatures, a thin line of beauty is always visible, to be seen to the keen observer, to the traveler who's willing to keep their senses open-minded, willing to see each moment with the vision of a curious child. Its veined wings rise in their ordinary pattern, translucent, yet powerful enough to flutter at speeds faster than any movement a man can make. Such great frequency, we can hardly imagine what perceptions these tiny creatures have, what mysterious worlds of the senses that they must experience that a man can never know. What great adventures to fly upon the wind. An evil motor lets forth its barbaric yelp in the distance, notifying our traveler that he approaches another adventurous civilization. What dark thoughts lie in those men's hearts? What avarice? He hopes that they're peaceful men. Perhaps they experience a great sense of fear in the world, and that's why they have such loud, monstrous engines. Perhaps they're just tools used to demonstrate, like the great screams of mountain apes.
In a world where freedom is history,
Where am I?
brutality is law.
Water drops lie upon the broad leaves that float upon the river's surface as he goes under a great catalpa tree, its dangling seed pods just over the tip of his trusty ranger's hat. All these massive engines, projections into space, projections into the atmosphere of the weary man trying to notify those in his social environment that he has great power around him if it's not inside him. Or if he doesn't possess the great power of great intellect, at least he can possess the great power of a massive machine, a machine that burns hot and guzzles the ancient DNA of forefathers, full creatures past.
It's just funny how none of my haters have a truck with a jet engine in it.
The wind picks up as he approaches the banks. His adventure nearly over, he begins to reflect upon its short duration. What has he learned? What peace has it brought to his heart? Is it an experience that he can cherish? Yes, it is. There's been a quietness on the river, a joy brought by the sounds of the birds, and the waves around his boat. It is here where we'll end this recording, listener. Thank you for joining us on this path. We hope that you can find a peaceful way in your life to ride, some solace in your heart. We thank you for listening. We look forward to our next great adventure.
We would love to receive your feedback, your improvisation suggestions, your questions for advice, and your musical compositions for response. Please email us or send us a voicemail. Our address is LionGoatPodcast@gmail.com. Find, like, review, subscribe, and contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, Spotify, TikTok, YouTube, and X at LionGoatPodcast, all one word. LionGoatPodcast. Please subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player. We are available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and anchor.fm/LionGoatPodcast. Please tell all your friends, enemies, and any strangers to listen to our podcast. This will help us bring joy to everyone. Text-to-speech services were provided by freetts.com and readloud.net. Various audio clip content, used for the purposes of satire, were located on youtube.com and the Internet Archive. Additional sound effects were provided by freesound.org. Other original music for today's show is composed, performed, and recorded by the excellent musicians at Hairline Productions. Today's show was edited, produced, and recorded by the world's greatest sound designers and engineers at Hairline Productions. Please like their content on SoundCloud/Hairline Productions.